Good to great begins with an insult to comfort. Good is not a stepping stone to great. Good is often the reason greatness never begins. Imagine a company that is respected, profitable, and professionally managed. Its products sell, its managers are busy, and nobody in the room is panicking. What would you expect a research team to find if they compared that company with one that suddenly broke through for 15 years of extraordinary results? The actual result is uncomfortable. The leap rarely began with noise, slogans, or a miracle acquisition. It began when leaders stopped accepting good performance as proof that the organization was healthy. Collins frames the whole book around a deliberately narrow question. He is not asking how a startup becomes famous, how a charismatic founder wins attention, or how a lucky industry rides a boom. He asks how an already established company, average or merely good for a long time, becomes great in a way that can be measured against the market and sustained beyond short bursts. That research frame matters because it removes many attractive excuses. The good to great companies were not all born in glamorous industries. They were not all young. They did not simply catch a wave that lifted every competitor. The comparison companies often had similar resources, markets, and opportunities, but they failed to make the same disciplined turn. The book, therefore, moves less like a motivational speech and more like an autopsy of mediocrity. A good company can have decent profits, decent culture, and decent public praise while still hiding a deeper weakness. It has no severe standard for greatness. The danger is not failure. Failure at least demands attention. The danger is being good enough to stop asking harder questions. For a viewer running a team today, the first application is blunt. Do not ask only whether the dashboard is green. Ask which good habit has become a ceiling. Ask which success story is now protecting an old assumption. A good organization becomes vulnerable when its past competence becomes a legal defense against change. The opening also explains why the rest of the book feels so unsentimental. Collins keeps returning to evidence, comparison, and cumulative discipline. Greatness is not presented as a mood. It is a standard that appears in leadership choices, people choices, strategic focus, disciplined action, technology use, and the slow turning of the flywheel. Good is not a platform when it becomes permission to stop climbing. The point is operational, not decorative. The idea has to change what the team does next. The research design is the quiet engine of the book because every lesson has to survive comparison. Picture a research team that begins with hundreds of companies and then filters for a very specific pattern. Long, ordinary performance, then a clear transition, then market results far above the general market for many years. What would you expect to explain the winners? The answer is not a single heroic cause. The result is a cluster of repeatable patterns that appeared in the good to great companies and did not appear with the same force in the comparisons. Collins and his team separate good to great companies from direct comparisons and unsustained comparisons. That distinction prevents the book from confusing a temporary spike with a transformation. A company that rises briefly and then fades is not treated as proof of greatness. A company in the same industry that had similar chances but failed to make the leap becomes part of the evidence. This is why the book can make claims that feel simple without being casual. The simplicity comes after filtering, not before it. The principles are not slogans invented at the beginning and illustrated afterward. They are conclusions drawn from patterns that survived a long process of selecting, comparing, debating, and rejecting explanations that did not fit. The appendices also matter to the argument. They show that the book is not merely telling colorful stories about famous companies. It is trying to explain why companies such as Walgreens, Kimberly-Clark, Nucor, Wells Fargo, Abbott, Kroger, Gillette, Pitney Bowes, Circuit City, Philip Morris, and Fannie Mae showed a sustained shift while comparison companies with similar opportunities did not. A modern reader should still be careful. The research is historical, and some companies later faced new problems. That does not destroy the value of the framework. It reminds us that a transformation pattern is not a permanent immunity certificate. Greatness must be renewed in new conditions. The practical use of the research lens is to resist cherry picking. Before copying a business story, ask, what comparison case am I ignoring? Before admiring one leader, ask, what similar leader failed? The book teaches the reader to love patterns more than anecdotes. Evidence becomes useful only when comparison makes it humble. That pressure keeps the book grounded in behavior rather than admiration. The first major surprise is that the leader at the center of the leap is not usually the loudest person in the story. Imagine choosing the kind of chief executive who could take a good company into a long run of greatness. Would you expect a celebrity personality, a dramatic visionary, and a leader whose face becomes the brand? The research showed almost the opposite. The most important leaders combined fierce professional will with personal humility, and that combination made the company larger than the leader. Collins calls this level 5 leadership. It does not mean softness, passivity, or a lack of ambition. These leaders are intensely ambitious, but their ambition is directed toward the institution rather than their own fame. They want the company to endure, and they measure themselves by whether successors can keep winning after they leave. Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark becomes one of the central examples. He did not look like a glamorous corporate hero, yet he made severe choices, including the move away from coated paper mills toward consumer paper products, that exposed the company to criticism and risk. The point is not that every company should sell its mills. The point is that level 5 leadership can make a frightening choice when the evidence says the old identity must die. The mirror and window image captures the psychology. The discipline is visible only when the next meeting, seat, or refusal changes. Imagine that same leader receiving a terrible quarterly report in front of the senior team. What would you expect people to watch first? The numbers or the leader's reaction? The result reveals the culture immediately because people learn whether truth is safe before they learn whether the plan is smart. Truth gets faster when ego gets smaller. When results are good, these leaders look out the window and credit other people, luck, and the team. When results are bad, they look in the mirror and take responsibility. Comparison leaders often reverse that movement, claiming credit when things rise and blaming conditions when things fall. This matters because ego changes the information system. If a leader must be admired, bad news becomes dangerous. People begin managing the leader instead of managing reality. A humble but determined leader makes the truth less personally expensive, so the company can see earlier and act faster. The practical test is immediate. In any team, ask whether leadership behavior makes truth easier or harder to speak. Ask whether success stories end with one name or with a strengthened institution. A leader who needs applause may still produce activity, but the organization becomes emotionally dependent on the leader's image. The quiet leader can be more dangerous to mediocrity than the dramatic one. The second surprise is that the companies did not first settle the perfect strategy and then recruit people to obey it. Imagine you are taking over a company in a changing market. You can spend your first months writing the grand strategy, or you can first decide who belongs on the bus, who should leave the bus, and which seats people should hold. Which move would seem more strategic? The result in the book is clear. The great companies treated people decisions as strategy before strategy had a final shape. First who? Then what means the leader begins with the right people, not with a motivational destination. If the right people are on the bus, the company can adapt as the road changes. If the wrong people are on the bus, even a smart destination becomes exhausting because energy goes into supervision, persuasion, politics, and compensation for misfit. This is not a slogan about hiring talent at any cost. Collins is careful about discipline. The right people are not merely skilled. They fit the company's standards, take responsibility without being tightly managed, and do not need a bureaucracy to force mature behavior. The wrong person in a key seat can damage momentum more than a weak strategy document. The idea also changes how layoffs and hiring are judged. Picture a strong employee sitting in the wrong seat for another year. What would you expect kindness to mean in that case? The actual result is not kindness at all if the person, the team, and the mission all keep paying for a mismatch that everyone can already see. Fit is a form of respect. The good to great companies were not reckless with people, but they did not delay indefinitely when they knew someone was wrong for a role. The humane question is not whether discomfort can be avoided forever. The humane question is whether a person and a company are being kept in a false arrangement that prevents both from doing better work. Compensation plays a smaller role than many expect. This is where the framework becomes work instead of vocabulary. Imagine the company trying to solve a wrong person problem only with a better bonus plan. What would you expect to change after the first excitement fades? The result is predictable. Pay can support responsible people, but it cannot manufacture the character the seat requires. Motivation cannot replace fit. The point is not to motivate the wrong people into right behavior. It is to attract and keep the right people who are already motivated by responsibility, standards, and contribution. Pay can support the system, but it cannot substitute for character and fit. For a current manager, this is a hard audit. Look at the calendar and ask how much time goes into managing around people who should not be in their current seats. Look at the strongest people and ask whether the company is wasting them in weak roles. A team becomes strategic when its people decisions reduce the need for constant rescue. The bus is not a metaphor for loyalty. It is a test of fit. The idea has to survive contact with a real calendar. The book then introduces a discipline that sounds contradictory. Confront the brutal facts, yet never lose faith. Suppose a leadership team is facing bad market data, a product that is weakening, and competitors that are moving faster. Would you expect morale to improve if the leader speaks more optimistically and filters the worst facts? What really happens is usually the reverse. False optimism delays adaptation, while disciplined truth can create the confidence that reality is finally being handled. Collins names this tension through the Stockdale paradox. Admiral Jim Stockdale survived captivity by holding two truths at once. He never abandoned faith that he would prevail in the end, and he never confused that faith with denial of the brutal facts of his current reality. The optimistic prisoners who attached hope to specific deadlines often broke when those deadlines passed. For companies, the lesson is not pessimism. It is disciplined realism. A great company needs faith that the work can matter, but also needs mechanisms that make facts impossible to hide. Leadership must create an environment where people can speak reality without being punished for disloyalty. The book emphasizes questions rather than answers, dialogue rather than coercion, autopsies without blame, and red flag mechanisms that force information to become visible. The point is not theatrical transparency. The point is to make bad facts useful early, before they become disasters. This connects directly to level 5 leadership. A leader obsessed with looking right cannot easily hold brutal facts. A leader committed to the company can. The ego feels attacked by reality. The institution feels protected by it. That difference changes meetings, metrics, and decisions. For modern work, the test is simple. What fact is everyone politely stepping around? Which metric is explained away every week? Which customer complaint is treated as an exception because the team likes the old story? The Stockdale discipline asks for faith after facts, not instead of facts. Faith without facts becomes theater. Facts without faith become surrender. The company becomes more honest when the concept changes a concrete choice. Imagine the team hearing a brutal fact in the middle of a planning meeting. What would you expect the best leader to do first? The results should be questions before defense, because reality becomes useful only after ego stops interrupting it. Questions before defense protect the institution. This keeps the lesson attached to action rather than applause. After the people and the facts comes one of the book's most memorable filters, the Hedgehog Concept. Imagine a company that can chase 20 attractive opportunities, each with a believable business case. What would you expect discipline to mean? More planning, more innovation, or more willingness to say no? The book's answer is sharper. Discipline begins when the company understands the one intersection where it can be best, where its economic engine works, and where it has deep passion. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one big thing. Collins uses that ancient contrast to describe strategic clarity. The good to great companies did not become simplistic. They became clear. They reduced complexity into a guiding concept that could inform thousands of choices without needing constant executive heroics. The three circles are demanding because each one can embarrass the company. What can we be best in the world at? Not what do we wish to be best at? Not what are we currently competent at, but what can we genuinely become best at? What drives our economic engine? Not revenue vanity, but the denominator or mechanism that truly moves profit and cash. What are we deeply passionate about? Not temporary excitement, but enduring commitment. Walgreens becomes a vivid case. Its concept centered on convenient drugstores with high profit per customer visit. That simple denominator clarified location, store design, acquisitions, and operational choices. The point is not that every company needs drugstores. The point is that a powerful economic denominator makes strategy visible in daily decisions. The hedgehog concept also requires humility. The pattern matters because it turns insight into a repeatable standard. Suppose the company is offered a large market that flatters the leadership team. What would you expect ambition to say? The answer in the book is severe. Ambition must still pass through the three circles, or it becomes an elegant distraction. Focus is proved by the attractive thing refused. Many companies are competent in areas where they can never be the best. Many leaders confuse a large market with a right market. Many teams keep projects because they are familiar, not because they sit inside the three circles. The concept forces abandonment as much as focus. For an individual or team, the three circles can become a weekly diagnostic. What can we do distinctively well? What actually drives results? What work can we sustain with real energy? If a project sits outside all three, calling it an opportunity may only make the way sound intelligent. A strategy becomes powerful when it is simple enough to refuse with. The practical value appears when the team can name the next constraint clearly. The hedgehog concept does not arrive because one executive goes away for a weekend and returns with a slogan. Picture a leadership group trying to define its one big focus. If the chief executive announces the answer too early, would you expect alignment to speed up? The result is often compliance without understanding. Collins instead describes a council process where the right people debate, examine facts, circle the question repeatedly, and allow clarity to emerge. The council is not a committee for bureaucracy. It is a disciplined conversation among people who can argue from evidence and still stay loyal to the institution. The process matters because the hedgehog concept must be understood, not merely approved. A slogan that people cannot reason through will collapse under pressure. This part of the book is easy to overlook because it is less dramatic than CEOs, buses, or flywheels. Yet it is central to implementation. Breakthrough concepts need social digestion. The team must learn why certain attractive options are outside the circles, why an economic denominator matters, and why passion without best-in-world potential is not enough. The council also protects the organization from the leader's private bias. If the same disciplined people keep examining the evidence, a pet idea has to survive contact with reality. The answer becomes less personal and more institutional. There's a caution here. Dialogue is not endless conversation. Collins is describing disciplined iteration, not indecision. The council returns to the questions until insight becomes clear enough to guide action, and then action becomes disciplined. The organization does not worship process. It uses process to earn clarity. In a current workplace, the council idea can be scaled down. A product team, leadership group, or creator business can choose a small set of people who understand the work and will tell the truth. The agenda is not brainstorming. The agenda is to test the 3 circles until refusal becomes as natural as commitment. Clarity that cannot survive a disciplined room is not clarity yet. This is the quiet part of transformation. Fewer excuses and more visible choices. Once the hedgehog concept is clear, the book shifts from strategy to behavior. Freedom works only inside discipline. Suppose a company wants creativity, speed, and entrepreneurial action. Would you expect the answer to be fewer rules and more permission? The actual result in the good to great pattern is more precise. Disciplined people do not need heavy bureaucracy, but they do need a clear frame inside which freedom is real and accountability is serious. A culture of discipline is not a tyrannical culture. Collins separates discipline from bureaucracy. Bureaucracy often grows to compensate for incompetence and lack of self-discipline. When the wrong people are on the bus, rules multiply. When the right people understand the hedgehog concept, fewer rules can produce stronger behavior. This is why the order of ideas matters. First who, then what? Confront facts. Find the hedgehog concept. Then build disciplined action. If discipline is imposed on confused strategy and weak people choices, it becomes a cage. If discipline is built around clarity and responsible people, it becomes power. The stop doing list is one of the most useful ideas here. The idea earns trust when it reduces confusion without creating theater. Picture a leadership team that adds 5 new goals but refuses to kill any old work. What would you expect the calendar to reveal? The result is not strategy, it is accumulation. Discipline shows up when a respectable activity is deliberately stopped. Companies often create strategy by adding initiatives. Collins argues that discipline also means stopping what is not fit. The courage to abandon good opportunities outside the hedgehog concept is what keeps the company from spreading itself thin. The book gives this idea a practical force through budget choices, operating choices, and personal conduct. A disciplined culture does not require a manager to chase everyone with reminders. People internalize the standard. They know the frame, they act within it, and they do not confuse freedom with random motion. For a modern team, the best test is not how many goals exist. It is how many goals can be killed without regret because they do not fit. A culture of discipline is visible when the team can refuse an exciting distraction without needing a crisis to justify the refusal. Freedom without a frame becomes drift. Discipline without freedom becomes dead weight. That is how a model becomes a management habit. The technology chapter is surprising because a book about corporate breakthrough refuses to treat technology as the breakthrough itself. Imagine 2 competitors watching a new technology appear. One rushes to announce transformation, buy systems, and look modern. The other asks whether the technology accelerates its hedgehog concept. Which one would you expect to win? The book shows that the great companies use technology as an accelerator of already understood momentum, while comparison companies often used it as a dramatic substitute for clarity. Collins does not argue against technology. He argues against technology panic. The good to great companies could be technologically sophisticated, but they did not begin with the tool. They began with the concept. If a technology fit the Hedgehog concept, they moved with commitment. If it did not fit, they ignored the noise. Walgreens and the internet becomes a useful example. The market rewarded dramatic online narratives, yet Walgreens kept asking how technology could support its convenient strategy rather than replace it with fashion. The point is not that the internet was unimportant. The point is that even important technology must be subordinated to strategic understanding. This chapter is more relevant now than when it was written. Every few years, a new tool promises to erase the need for discipline. Artificial intelligence, automation, analytics, social platforms, and remote work systems can all become accelerators. They can also become expensive ways to avoid deciding what the organization is actually built to do. The discipline question is therefore not, should we use the new technology? The discipline question is, where does this technology accelerate a flywheel we already understand? If the answer is vague, the tool may create activity without advantage. For a viewer, the practical action is to separate adoption from acceleration. Adoption means the team has a tool. Acceleration means the tool makes the core engine turn faster. Many technology plans fail because they prove adoption and assume acceleration. Technology multiplies clarity, and it also multiplies confusion. The work stays serious because each concept has to govern a trade-off. Suppose a new technology promises speed while the company still lacks a clear denominator. What would you expect the tool to accelerate? In fact, it accelerates whatever already exists, including confusion. Tools need a wheel before they need a motor. The flywheel is the book's answer to the myth of the single breakthrough moment. Picture a giant heavy wheel. You push once, and nothing seems to happen. You push again, and it barely moves. After many disciplined pushes, it begins to turn, then builds momentum. If someone arrives late, what would they call the moment it spins fast? They might call it a breakthrough, but the real result came from accumulated pushes that were consistent with the same direction. Collins argues that transformation feels dramatic from the outside and cumulative from the inside. The good to great companies did not usually experience one grand program that changed everything overnight. They pushed in a consistent direction until momentum became visible. Each decision reinforced the next. Right people, facts, hedgehog clarity, discipline, technology acceleration, and visible results. The comparison companies often fell into the doom loop. They launched programs, changed direction, chased acquisitions, hired saviors, announced revolutions, and then abandoned the effort when results did not arrive quickly. Instead of building momentum, they reset the wheel again and again. This idea is psychologically important because humans love dramatic explanations. We want to know the one event, the one campaign, the one leader, the one technology. The flywheel says that greatness often hides inside boring consistency until the compounding becomes undeniable. The doom loop is not only a corporate pattern. Imagine a founder changing the offer every time attention shifts online. What would you expect customers to feel after the fifth change? In fact, the company may look energetic from inside, while the market sees only confusion. Momentum needs recognizable repetition. A creator changes niches every month. A manager changes metrics every quarter. A founder copies competitors whenever attention shifts. A student changes study methods after 2 days. In each case, the person may feel active while preventing compounding. The practical question is severe. What push are we willing to repeat long enough for momentum to become visible? If the team cannot name the flywheel, it will mistake motion for progress and impatience for intelligence. A breakthrough is often momentum finally becoming visible. The test is not whether the phrase is memorable, but whether the decision improves. Near the end, Collins connects this book to a larger question. After a company becomes great, can it become built to last? Imagine a company has made the leap and now enjoys strong momentum. Would you expect the next challenge to be protecting what made it successful or changing everything to keep growing? The answer is both more subtle and more demanding. Preserve the core while stimulating progress, so discipline does not become nostalgia and change does not become rootlessness. This final movement matters because good to great is not the whole life of an institution. It describes the transition from good performance to sustained high performance. Built to last asks how visionary companies endure across generations. The bridge between them is the ability to combine core values with relentless adaptation. The good to great framework can become dangerous if treated as a frozen recipe. The companies in the study made choices in specific historical conditions. The deeper lesson is not to copy their surface moves forever. The deeper lesson is to practice the disciplines that allowed them to see reality, focus, build momentum, and renew the institution. This is also where the book's limitations should be held honestly. A company can later stumble. A market can change. A once great practice can become stale. The point of the book is not to promise permanent greatness. It is to show the kind of disciplined transformation that made greatness possible in a measurable period. For current readers, this final link turns the book from a corporate history into a personal standard. If you lead anything, the question is not whether you can quote the flywheel or draw 3 circles. The question is whether your daily choices preserve what is essential while forcing progress where comfort has settled in. The ending returns to the opening insult. Good remains the enemy because good keeps returning in new forms. A good quarter, a good team, a good reputation, a good process. Greatness requires the humility to keep testing whether good has become the new ceiling. An institution lasts when its core is firm enough to move. A company can respect the idea only by putting it into practice. The complete book is not a list of business tips. It is a sequence of disciplines that make mediocrity harder to hide. Now, imagine applying the whole book to one team you know well. If you only copy one visible tactic, what would you expect to change? The likely result is disappointment. But if you combine humble leadership, the right people, brutal facts, hedgehog clarity, disciplined action, technology as accelerator, and flywheel patience, the organization has a real chance to change its trajectory. The sequence is the insight. Level 5 leadership makes truth less dangerous. First who, then what makes strategy adaptable. Brutal facts prevent fantasy. The Hedgehog Concept creates focus. Discipline turns focus into behavior. Technology accelerates rather than distracts. The flywheel explains why momentum takes time. Each idea corrects a common management temptation. Charisma is corrected by humility and will. Strategy obsession is corrected by people discipline. Positivity is corrected by facts. Opportunity chasing is corrected by the 3 circles. Control is corrected by disciplined freedom. Technology worship is corrected by strategic fit. Impatience is corrected by the flywheel. This is why the book still matters, even when individual company stories age. The named companies belong to a historical period, but the temptations are current. Leaders still want saviors. Teams still avoid hard people decisions. Organizations still hide from facts. Strategy still becomes a list of initiatives. Technology still attracts panic. Momentum is still confused with a launch event. The practical standard is not to become a perfect, good-to-great company tomorrow. The standard is to make one honest turn of the wheel. Replace one ego move with institutional responsibility. Put one person decision in the open. Name one brutal fact. Clarify one denominator. Stop one distraction. Attach one technology to one real engine. Repeat the push. Good to great ends with a demanding kind of hope. It says greatness is not reserved only for the naturally glamorous, the lucky, or the loud. It is available to organizations willing to practice disciplined thought and disciplined action for longer than comfort wants. The final question is not whether greatness is possible. The final question is whether good has become too comfortable to challenge. One more layer should be added before closing. Collins is writing about companies, but the logic can scale down to teams and individuals only if the reader keeps the research humility. A person cannot simply declare a private hedgehog concept and assume the market agrees. A small team cannot say it has level 5 leadership because the leader sounds modest in meetings. The framework becomes useful when it is tested against behavior and results. That is why Good to Great is best read as a discipline of questions. Who gets credit when things go well? Which people decisions are we avoiding? What fact would change our plan if we had the courage to face it? What can we truly be best at? What denominator drives our engine? What are we willing to stop doing? Where does technology accelerate an existing flywheel? Which push deserves repetition even before applause arrives? The book is also a warning against theatrical transformation. Picture a company announcing a transformation campaign with new language, new posters, and no harder people decisions. What would you expect 6 months later? The result is usually familiar work wearing new clothes. Theater can imitate urgency, but it cannot turn the flywheel. Many organizations announce change because announcement feels like movement. They rename departments, launch campaigns, buy tools, and celebrate the kickoff. Collins keeps pulling attention back to the quieter test. Are the people, facts, concept, discipline, and flywheel actually changing? If not, the launch may only be a polished version of the doom loop. A final practical reading is to treat the framework as a sequence of audits. Start with leadership. Does the institution matter more than the leader's image? Move to people. Are the key seats occupied by people who raise the standard? Move to truth. Can brutal facts travel upward without being softened? Move to focus. Does the team know what it must refuse? Move to discipline. Are habits aligned with the concept? Move to technology. Does the tool accelerate the engine? Move to momentum. Are repeated pushes compounding? If those questions become normal, the book has done its work. It has not given the reader a secret formula. It has made ordinary excuses harder to defend. And that may be the most powerful part of the book. It turns greatness from a fantasy into a set of visible responsibilities. A careful reader should also notice what the book does not promise. It does not promise that a company will remain great forever, and it does not say that one historical study can remove every future uncertainty. Its value is more practical. It gives leaders a sequence of questions that make lazy explanations harder to keep. The first question is about ambition. Does ambition point toward the institution or toward the leader's image? That difference changes how credit is distributed, how blame is accepted, and how successors are prepared. A company built around one personality may rise quickly, but it becomes fragile when the personality needs protection. The second question is about people. If the team keeps avoiding one wrong seat decision, every other discipline becomes more expensive. Meetings become longer, rules become heavier, and strong people quietly carry the cost. People discipline is not cruelty. It is the refusal to build strategy on a mismatch everyone already understands. Imagine a team that finally names the wrong seat problem without attacking the person. What would you expect to change first? The result is usually relief before speed because everyone stops pretending the work design is healthy. Relief is often the first sound of truth entering the room. The third question is about reality. The Stockdale paradox is powerful because it protects both courage and honesty. A team without faith gives up too early. A team without facts keeps walking into walls. The discipline is to hold both at once, so the future is faced without lying about the present. The fourth question is about focus. The Hedgehog Concept asks for more than a market opportunity. It asks for the intersection of best-in-world potential, economic engine, and durable passion. If one circle is missing, the opportunity may still be good, but good is exactly the danger the book warned about. Suppose an attractive project fails the three-circle test, but promises quick attention. What would you expect a disciplined company to do? The answer is not to dress up the distraction as strategy. The answer is to refuse it while the refusal still feels costly. Refusal is where focus becomes visible. The fifth question is about daily conduct. A culture of discipline is not a poster about accountability. It is what people do when nobody is chasing them. It appears in budgets, calendars, meetings, hiring, abandonment, and a willingness to repeat boring moves that strengthen the flywheel. The sixth question is about technology. The book's warning is not anti-technology, it is anti-panic. A tool can accelerate a clear engine, but it cannot choose the engine. When leaders buy technology to avoid strategic discomfort, the tool becomes a mirror that reflects confusion at higher speed. Picture a leadership team adopting a new system before naming the flywheel. What would you expect the first dashboard to show? The result may look impressive and still be meaningless, because measurement without a clear engine only decorates uncertainty. Tools need a wheel before they need a motor. The seventh question is about patience. The flywheel image matters because it changes how success is interpreted. Outsiders may see a sudden breakthrough, but insiders know the breakthrough was built through repeated pushes. The wheel remembers effort that the audience never saw. The doom loop is the emotional opposite of that patience. It offers the thrill of a fresh beginning without the discipline of compounding. New program, new speech, new acquisition, new leader, new slogan. The organization feels movement, but the wheel keeps starting from zero. For a small team, the flywheel may be simple. Better customer insight creates a sharper offer. The sharper offer improves trust. Trust improves retention. Retention creates better data, and better data improves the next offer. The exact will differs, but the discipline is the same. Name the linked pushes and repeat them. For an individual, the book becomes a mirror. Where has good become a ceiling? Which seat are you occupying badly? Which fact are you editing before you admit it? Which opportunity sits outside your three circles? Which tool is giving you the feeling of progress without the engine of progress? Imagine answering those questions every Friday for 3 months. What would you expect to happen? The result would not be instant greatness, but it would make drift harder. A person or team that keeps facing these questions begins to build a flywheel of honesty. The central demand is severe but hopeful. Greatness is not reserved for the loudest leader, the newest technology, or the luckiest market. It belongs to institutions willing to practice disciplined people choices, disciplined thought, and disciplined action after the excitement has faded. That is why the book's title still works. Good to great is not really a promise that every company can become legendary. It is a warning that good can become a hiding place. The work begins when good is no longer allowed to be the comfortable excuse. The lasting image is the flywheel in a quiet room. No crowd is cheering yet. No headline has arrived. Someone places both hands on the wheel and pushes again, because greatness starts as disciplined pressure before it becomes visible momentum. Use the book as a short sequence of operating questions. Are the right people in the right seats? What brutal fact must be named? What opportunity must be refused? What technology accelerates the flywheel? And what repeated push deserves another turn? These questions are not glamorous, but they prevent a team from mistaking a new label, tool, or launch for real movement. Good can return after every success, so the discipline has to be renewed whenever comfort starts sounding like evidence. That is the quiet demand Collins leaves behind. Do not wait for greatness to feel dramatic. Make the next disciplined choice concrete. Repeat it long enough to matter, and let momentum become a proof.